Hello and welcome to Media Snack in our lovely new home. We have our new studio, new shelves, need some new books. So let's just crack straight on because a really interesting topic. We're going to talk about this hypothesis of a company like Accenture buying a holding company like Publicis. And it's something which is starting to gather a little bit of conversation and expectation.
That's right. I mean, the first suggestion, perhaps, of a mega acquisition was at Cannes, when the suggestion was perhaps WPP could be an acquisition target for Accenture.
So what we thought would be interesting to kind of explore that. I mean, Accenture seemed to be of those kind of consultant stroke audit firms. They seem to be the one which maybe is the best positioned or best qualified to make that kind of acquisition on the basis of they've been quite acquisitive and they've gathered a war chest and things like that. And then we're going to look at Publicis, which in our view is probably the agency group of them all at the moment that seems most ready to be acquired of the 5 or 6 companies that make up those holding companies.
But we're talking about massive businesses, right? I mean, let's look at Accenture. Accenture have got annual revenues of 35 billion. Since 2015, their share price has increased by 70%. And if you kind of look at Publicis' share price over that period, their share price now is the same as it was in 2015.
So there's been net zero over the last couple of years for Publicis. And actually, if you look back, if you remember, Publicis were one side of a potential merger in the industry, right? Omnicom and Publicis were discussing in 2013 a merger, which didn't work out for a number of reasons, which we've talked about before. And Publicis' share price is the same pretty much now as it was pre-merger talks in 2013. So, across that time, they've been very volatile, but kind of net zero on their business versus the 70% pretty straight line growth of Accenture.
That's right, and just the scale of the business. I mean, Accenture have got over 400,000 employees. That's 5 times
the size.
That's an army. That is, that's 5 times the size of Publicis. Although Publicis have actually been pushing headcount, so 23% I think has increased over the last couple of years, which has I think shrunk slightly now that they've got the restructuring in place. But still, Accenture is just a massive business, even in comparison to Publicis.
So, and rumours of them gathering a war chest, and we've made some comment before, and you're probably aware, some of the acquisitions, Accenture Interactive, they make a lot of acquisitions anyway, but their Interactive division, that's kind of like their agency division, has made a huge amount of acquisitions of creative agencies and digital agencies and things like that in the last few years. So why would an Accenture want to buy an agency instead of building an agency?
Well, I think it's probably down to the fact that they want to do it quickly rather than slowly. I mean, even in the last 12 months, they've acquired 37 businesses. Right, so they're very active in the marketplace. But the ability to go in and in one foul swoop buy an entire network of marketing communication services is significantly appealing, I'd imagine, if you've got the war chest to go and do that. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why they want to do it.
I agree. So it kind of gets them to that scale really quickly. I guess that maybe they're building foundations right now. To kind of create a Publicis is going to take them a lot of time. So better just go and get it done. The other thing I thought was really interesting that I'd read recently, and I can't remember who it was that I'd read. So if it was you, please let us know, because we need to credit you. Is that somebody was saying that average salary costs in an agency like Publicis or others are far lower than Accenture's average salaries, and particularly for their consultant salaries. So the idea of trying to build out agency using Accenture consulting resource would basically make that the most expensive agency in the world.
That's right.
But actually, if you acquire, then you can keep your agency salaries comparable to agencies, not to consultants, to make them much more competitive.
That's right. And you buy everything you want, and then keep it, and then discard the elements of that acquisition that perhaps are less useful to your kind of forward strategy. Perhaps that's what they're looking at.
So it does make sense. It does. It seems like kind of a bit weird and wacky to think that one of these big holding companies is going to be bought, because we imagine we work in the industry. These are the giants of the industry, but actually they're dwarfed by many other businesses. They're really not that big, and they're definitely open to acquisition. The thing it would allow Accenture to do from a consulting or any management consultant business, is offer a much more end-to-end solution. Really, you've got the ear of the CEO and developing, corporate strategy, all the way then down to, the most finite, tiny pieces of execution in, networks across the world.
That's right.
Okay, so let's think about then Publicis as a potential acquisition target, maybe for Accenture, but maybe not. But of the groups, it seems to be kind of quite well positioned to be acquired, right? Why would that be?
In this crazy world. Well, for a number of reasons. The first is they've just gone through a massive restructuring. Okay, so they've created this one Publicis, and that has streamlined their kind of business, made them more efficient, I suppose. They've got new leadership in. Maurice Lévy left, and his successor, Arthur Sadoun, came in. So kind of new leadership and a new vision and a new kind of set of principles driving the business.
Because there was the rumours, if you think of like these holding companies, I mean, they're all kind of run by, very opinionated, highly competitive individuals, right? It have been. And the idea of them ever selling to each other always seemed ridiculous.
That's right.
And which is why the Publicis Omnicom merger was such a kind of crazy idea, because and that's why it fell apart, because they couldn't decide who was going to be in charge.
Yeah, that's right.
With Maurice having left Publicis and fresh leadership, that's got to make it them
perhaps
potentially more open.
Absolutely. And you've also got to remember that Publicis Groupe, or certainly the media part of Publicis, came out of 2005 really struggling. Of all of the holding groups, they were the ones that probably took the bloodiest nose on the back of Mediapalooza. They're, from those perspectives, they are perhaps primed.
And talking about the merger as well, you'd imagine, even though that was in 2013, so we're kind of 4 years on from that, and that's gone really quickly, hasn't it? You'd imagine that during that process, and remember that took 9 months to kind of fall apart, and these businesses went through a huge process of investigating integration. So back then, probably more so than any other group, they'll have a pretty good idea of really how good their network is, this kind of scale and size of the operation, really have done their diligence, got their numbers together, have really interrogated the strengths and weaknesses of the business, and also where potential synergies with a partner are going to be. So, within Publicis, amongst Publicis executives, there is already a knowledge and an awareness, and maybe even an openness to collaborate and work and be integrated with other businesses.
And they've got an amazing collection of brands within their portfolio. Saatchi's, BBH, Sapient. I mean, these are power brokers within the kind of marketing community.
So Publicis, the creative agency, is the biggest kind of asset in terms of network they've got. So they're active in about 110 countries in the world. Saatchi's is about 60-something markets. Same with Burnett. Both Starcom and Zenith are around 50. They're active in 50 countries, and then that tails off somewhat. Sapient are in about a dozen markets, I think, and Digitas about 25. So, but they've got some not just some brilliant creative assets, some very famous and very prestigious brands there, but real scale of network. If you think about something like Accenture wanting to execute around the world, Publicis have got that network ready for them to do that.
Okay, well argued. So is it going to happen?
It will happen, but something like this is going to happen in the next 6-12 months, I think, pretty quickly. However, the sentiment seems to be that, when we're talking here about Accenture and Publicis, that's very unlikely to be the marriage that happens. Just simply because, as we saw with the Publicis Omnicom merger in 2013, the cultural fit, or the cultural misalignment, let's call it, between a big American company and a big French company was, I think, too big for them to get over. And so if Accenture are going to make an acquisition, they're not going to buy a big French group who might well resist that. You'd probably bet for them to buy one of the big American groups, and IPG seems the most likely target. So Accenture and IPG in the next kind of 6-12 months is a reasonable shout.
Good shout. And so from a French perspective, who would be in the market for Publicis? Perhaps it could be a Capgemini.
Yeah, I think that would make a lot of sense. And culturally, of course, those businesses would perhaps be much better aligned. Okay, good week 4.
The next generation of agency leaders.
Okay.
In the last week, it seems, 4 of the most high-profile agency CEOs
In the UK.
have left.
Dropping like flies.
They are, and
Yeah.
so for any ambitious media leaders in there, then there's the hot seat.
Yeah, and maybe that's something we might talk about that on a future episode. Actually, just kind of why, because there's been a lot of change, right, in headcount, in leadership, in agencies in the last year.
It's good, and it's been a bad week for.
Well, it's been a bad week for Dentsu Aegis, really, in the UK, and for one particular reason, is that their largest client in the UK is actually the UK government. So if you remember 3 or so years ago, the UK government put their media buying up for tender, and Cara won the business away from WPP. Those in the industry will know that didn't end well and actually ended up in High Court and was kind of a bit messy. 3 years on, the government are kind of reviewing that contract. Yep. So it's a bit of a nervy time for Dentsu Aegis, so there's nothing to say that they can't retain that. So it's not necessarily, it's a bit unfair to call it a bad week.
It's a statutory review, right?
It's a statutory review. Neither of us can say that word. So it's not necessarily anything bad for the agency particularly, but that is just you don't want your largest client going up for review. What is really good though, I think, because it didn't end in the most pleasant way last time around, what's been really encouraging is that the leadership on the government side, particularly Alex Aitken, who kind of represents communications at the cabinet office level and is he's like the CMO basically of the government, has gone out very front foot and said, we are one of the major advertisers in the UK. We're the government. Yeah. We understand that the industry has its challenges, and we want to use our influence and to use this process to hear everybody's point of view and to help make things better. Yeah. Yeah. So, we don't want to just drive down the price of media. We want to take a more strategic view. So I think that's actually maybe it's a good week for the industry in that sense. Certainly the UK industry. Yeah. We went to the briefing.
We did.
Today.
It's very impressive, actually.
Which was, really good. And this was the first meeting of the entire process. So we went to the Treasury buildings in Whitehall, just yards from Downing Street, and we met with some of the key stakeholders in the government side, and they laid out their requirement for a fully transparent process, driven, out of trust, focusing on creating value and all the kind of good stuff. Yeah. So it's really encouraging to see.
There was a real statement of intent, I think, and they laid out their ambitions and their requirements to the agency community. Yeah. And the agency community are going to hold them to account for it.
Yeah, it's good. We look forward to see how that develops. Okay, question of the week is an easy one, really. Who are Accenture going to buy?
Publicis, IPG, or whatever.
Great. Vote up here. But that's all your media snack for this week. Thank you very much for watching.
See you next week. Okay, this is going well. Let's go.
Okay. Yeah, it's going well.
Yeah. You sound surprised.
Publicis, IPG, whatever.
Yeah. Whatever. Is that an agency?